The end of 2025, Williams appeared to be back. Not back at the very front, not yet. But for the first time in years, this legendary team looked like it finally had direction. Williams finished fifth in the Constructors Championship, its best result since 2017. Carlos Sainz delivered two podiums in the second half of the season, helping turn Williams from a rebuilding project into one of Formula One's most exciting comeback stories. The gamble appeared to be working. James Vowles had spent years restructuring the team, replacing outdated systems, preparing Williams for F1's enormous 2026 regulation reset, and Carlos Sainz rejected other opportunities and placed his future in Williams' hands. And then 26 arrived. Williams didn't move closer to the front. It fell backward. The team that finished fifth with 137 points in 2025 entered the summer of 26 sitting eighth with only 11 points. The great Williams comeback had suddenly become one of Formula One's biggest disappointments, and the driver, who was supposed to help bring Williams back to glory, may now be wondering whether joining the team was the biggest mistake of his career. To understand why 26 matters so much, you have to understand what Williams used to be. Williams was not simply another Formula One team. It was one of the giants. During its greatest years, Williams won championships through engineering excellence, ruthless efficiency, and an absolute obsession with performance. This was the team of Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost, Damon Hill, and Jacques Villeneuve. Williams built cars that didn't merely compete with Ferrari and McLaren, they beat them. But after years of success, the team slowly lost its way. The infrastructure aged, the organization fell behind, and the technology became outdated. By the late 2010s, one of Formula One's most successful teams had become a regular presence at the back of the grid. The Williams name remained legendary, but the performance did not. When James Vowles took control of Williams in 2023, he didn't promise a quick recovery. He promised a complete rebuild. Vowles had spent years inside Mercedes during its championship-dominating era. He understood what a modern Formula One organization needed to look like. And Williams wasn't even close. The team needed new technology, they needed new processes, they needed new personnel. But most importantly, they needed an entirely new culture. And Vowles made it incredibly clear that short-term pain would be necessary. Williams was willing to sacrifice immediate results in order to build something capable of succeeding under the completely new 26 regulations. He later acknowledged that the restructuring could hurt the team in the short term, explaining that Williams was effectively prepared to sacrifice 24 and 25 to build the right foundations for 26. It was an enormous gamble, but in 2025 it started to look brilliant. Carlos Sainz didn't arrive at Williams as a driver on the decline. He arrived as a proven Grand Prix winner. Sainz had won races for Ferrari. He had claimed pole position. He had shared garages with Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and Charles Leclerc. He understood how top teams operated, and when Ferrari replaced him with Lewis Hamilton, Sainz suddenly became the most valuable driver available on the market. Audi wanted him, Alpine wanted him, and Williams wanted him. Sainz chose Williams. And that decision was bigger than just a simple driver signing. It was a bold statement. A driver capable of winning races believed in the Williams project. And James Vowles described the signing as a clear message to the rest of Formula One. Williams was serious about returning to the front. The beginning of Sainz's Williams career wasn't easy. He needed time to adapt to a very different car after years at Ferrari. But eventually, everything started to come together. And he took Williams back to the podium in Azerbaijan, and then he did it again in Qatar. Those results, they helped secure fifth in the Constructors Championship, and Williams ended 2025 having scored 120 points more than it managed in 2024. For the first time in years, Williams wasn't selling hope. It was producing results, and Sainz had become the face of the revival. The new Formula One regulations represented the opportunity Williams had been waiting for. There were new chassis rules, new aerodynamics, new power units. A major change in how energy would be generated, deployed, and managed. Every team would have to start again. And for Williams, that meant the weaknesses of the previous era might finally become less important. The established competitive order, it could be broken, and the old advantages should disappear. Williams had spent years preparing for this very moment. It had sacrificed development opportunities, and it had rebuilt whole departments, recruited experienced personnel, and signed Carlos Sainz, partly because it needed a driver capable of leading the team through such a major transition. The expectation wasn't necessarily that Williams would immediately fight for the championship. Vowles himself warned that moving from fifth to fourth would be exponentially more difficult than climbing out of the lower midfield. But Williams was expected to improve, and it was expected to close the gap. They were also expected to prove that all those years of rebuilding had created something real. But instead, the opposite happened. The warning signs appeared before the first race. Williams missed the Barcelona test after delays in preparing the new car, and the FW48 arrived overweight. The team was already behind before the season had properly begun, and in Formula One, falling behind at the beginning of a new regulation cycle, it can be devastating. The car lacked downforce and it struggled for consistent performance. Reliability, it became a major concern, and Williams had not produced the platform it believed it was actually building. James Vowles later admitted that the winter had been difficult and that the team had not achieved the car it wanted. The promised step toward the front became a fight simply to score points, and after finishing 5th in 25, Williams entered the midpoint of 26, 8th in the championship, ahead of only Audi, Aston Martin, and Cadillac. Carlos Sainz had just 6 points, Alex Albon 5. Williams had gone scoreless in Spain, Austria, Britain, and Belgium before another difficult weekend in Hungary. And this wasn't just a small setback. This was a collapse in expectations. Williams had spent years preparing for 2026, and when 2026 arrived, the team appeared less competitive than it had been before the reset. The Williams situation may demonstrate one of the biggest dangers in rebuilding a Formula One team. Change too little and you remain trapped in the past. Change too much and the organization can lose control of the present. Williams was not only designing a completely new car, it was also transforming the infrastructure responsible for designing that car. New systems were being introduced, new people were arriving, and new processes were replacing the old ones. Departments were being restructured while simultaneously trying to produce one of the most technically complex cars in Formula One history. And that creates an enormous risk. The team's missed test, overweight car, and delayed development may not be isolated mistakes. They may be symptoms of an organization attempting too much change at the same time. Vowles has maintained that these painful lessons can ultimately strengthen Williams. The team says the engineering work required to bring the car below the weight limit has been completed, and a phased development program is expected to continue deep into the season. But Formula One doesn't stop while a team reorganizes itself. Mercedes is winning, Ferrari's scoring heavily, McLaren and Red Bull are still developing, and even the midfield teams Williams hoped to leave behind, they're moving forward. Williams may have built a better organization, but it still needs to build a better race car. Carlos Sainz has made difficult career decisions before. He left Toro Rosso. He moved to Renault. He joined McLaren just before that team began its rise. Then he left McLaren for Ferrari, and at Ferrari, he became a Grand Prix winner. But after losing his seat to Lewis Hamilton, Sainz faced perhaps the most important decision of his career, and he chose Williams. In 2025, that decision looked inspired. Sainz stood on the podium twice, and he helped deliver Williams' best championship results in 8 years. He appeared to be leading one of Formula One's greatest comeback stories, but now the question has significantly changed. Did Carlos Sainz help bring Williams back to glory, or did he attach the final prime years of his career to a project that just wasn't ready? It would be easy to frame this as Carlos Sainz choosing the wrong team, but Williams also chose Sainz for a reason. It needed more than speed, it needed leadership. Sainz is known for his technical feedback. He is deeply involved in setup and development of the cars that he races. He studies data relentlessly, and he's experienced several different Formula One organizations and understands the difference between teams that merely talk about winning and teams equipped to do it. Sainz's role isn't simply to drive the car Williams gives him. His role is to help identify why the car is actually failing. The 2025 podium showed what Sainz could deliver when Williams gave him that opportunity. The 2026 results show that even an elite driver cannot overcome the fundamental limitations of a race car. Williams did not sign Sainz to rescue a bad design. They signed him to help build a winning organization, and that process may take much longer than anyone actually expected. Perhaps the biggest misconception surrounding Williams is that 2026 was supposed to complete the rebuild. James Vowles has suggested that Williams' real target for operating at a championship winning level is closer to 2030. That changes the perspective, but that explanation only goes so far. And they still produced a car that began the season overweight, late, and lacking performance. Long-term plans matter, but eventually those plans, they must produce results. And a team cannot constantly ask its drivers, employees, and supporters to wait for the next season. At some point, tomorrow has to arrive. Williams gambled almost everything on Formula One's new era. It sacrificed short-term development, it rebuilt its organization, and it signed Carlos Sainz. It placed its faith in the idea that the 2026 regulations would create the opportunity that it needed, and so far that gamble has failed. If Williams can fix the FW48, accelerate its development, and prove that its new infrastructure works, 2026 may eventually be remembered as just a difficult beginning. So, can Williams still pull this off? Can James Vowles transform years of investment into a car capable of fighting near the front? And can Carlos Sainz become the driver who brings one of Formula One's greatest teams back from the dead? Because in Formula One, belief can keep a project alive, but only performance can prove that the gamble was worth it.